Comp Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, October 24th to order at 10:03 a.m.
Okay, roll call. Ms. Goodman.
Present.
Ms. Herman.
Present.
Mr. Whelan. Present. Mr. Canepa.
Here.
For the record, we will show that Mr. Wohlkamp, Mr. Keokum, and Ms. Regallo are not present. Thank you.
Right. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of the minutes for the meeting from July 25th. So if the committee members have any corrections to the minutes.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Can we get you to, I do it, turn on your just microphone, make
I will
sure it's on.
motion to approve the minutes.
Thank
Second.
you.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Right. Next on our agenda, we have public comment. Ms. Strange.
Yes, there is no public comment at this time.
All right. Then we'll move into the nationwide presentation for the program status reports for the second quarter.
Thank you and good morning.
Pull your microphone a little closer. Thank you. I rely on these recordings sometimes when I'm putting the meeting minutes together, so I appreciate that.
All right, I'll make sure to speak up. I don't want you to have to strain and your ear and not know what we're saying. So again, good morning. What I'm passing out is just a flyer from the most recent J.D. Power Participant Satisfaction Survey. I didn't email this, but I can to the group. But we're just proud to announce that that we finished second overall in the J.D. Power survey, which was conducted this year based on participant satisfaction. And so this is just a simple flyer and handout of the results of the survey, which once again just measures overall satisfaction, mainly from the customer service center. But we're very proud of the results and just wanted to share this with you. I know that when the survey came out, I also sent the email as well. I think it was a couple weeks back, but I just wanted to share that. So we have a couple of items on the agenda this morning. The first is our quarterly report. Then we'd like to discuss the Secure Act 2.0 provision 328, which we touched briefly on last quarter. And then we'll finish up with a brief discussion on some in-plan guarantee products and a request we have from a participant here at the county. So we'll start with just the overall plan summary. It's on the screen. This shows your 457 and your 401A and then the total assets for both of your plans across the top. Then we add contributions for the quarter. We subtract distributions and fees and loans. Then we have the market gain, which you can see on the sort of the bottom right. It'll say gain loss, and there was a $25.4 million gain for the quarter, which was just incredible. So the market definitely cooperated, lots of great things happening, and so your plan benefited from that. Finished at $608 million at the end of September. So we'll take a look at just your 457 plan. We section these out. So there's your 457 and there's your 401A. So with respect to participants, the plan finished at 7,365 participants at the end of the quarter. That was again September 30th. Your average balance in your plan was 78,568, and that was up 2,000 from the quarter prior, mainly due to market fluctuation. And then the average number of investments has pretty much stayed the same from last quarter. Then a couple of other items to note on the bottom right, we have your Roth usage. These are your participants that are in after tax. There's 1,158 with 8.7 million. So Roth usage is continuing to gain in popularity. And then when we look at your plan assets, the pie chart just shows that 53% of the assets are held by participants that are employed with the county. 46% are held by those that are terminated. And then we have some others that just weren't coded. We don't have term dates in the system for those. So it's roughly a 50-50 split. So keep an eye on that. We have a lot of marketing efforts to conserve money in the plan, as when your employees leave, we don't want them rolling money out. And so all of our efforts, again, are to conserve the assets. Some optional strategies. I was not able to get the Schwab quarterly report. It's a little too early in the quarter, so they'll probably have it ready they said by Friday or Monday. So as soon as we have that available through Schwab, I'll send it over via email. But on the lower left of the screen, at the end of the quarter, there were 13 participants in Schwab, 2.2 million. You can see the average balance is roughly 176,000. So much higher than the average balance in the plan itself. So we do have a few Schwab users, not a lot, but it's very heavily used by those who choose. And then above that, we have the average Roth balance of 7,531. So we talked about Roth on the prior page. Again, we have about 8.7 million in Roth with, again, an average of roughly 7,500 per participant. For contributions, on the upper left for the quarter, Nationwide received 8.3 million. Most of that was payroll deferrals. We did get some roll-ins and some transfers in. Right kind of in the middle of the screen, we have current quarter versus your prior quarter. So the current quarter and prior quarter were almost identical. So we're getting roughly $8.3 to $8.4 million in new contributions, again, the last 2 quarters in a row. The very bottom right, I know it might be hard to read on the screen, but there's a row that really stands out. We talked about this last quarter, that when Nationwide receives money from your participants, 52% of all new money, or 52 cents on every dollar, is going into a target date fund. So the diversification is excellent. Your participants are doing the right thing. They are saving properly. That's a high number, which we think is great. The rest is split up really amongst the other asset classes. The only other highlights would be fixed assets and cash. The fixed fund is receiving roughly 13% of new money, and large cap funds, which are typically popular in retirement plans, are getting roughly 17%, and then the rest are lower percentages. Oh, and thank you for printing the report, by the way. Appreciate that. For money out, money in was slightly higher than money out for the quarter distributions. There was $8 million that went out the door. Most of that, when we look at current quarter, right in the middle of the screen, kind of, I'd say roughly half went to rollouts and transfers out of the plan. And then the rest was split up amongst retirement, which is simply your participants taking a distribution in cash. And then there are other types of distributions as well, like RMDs. We're going to see RMDs higher in the fourth quarter, which we typically do. So in a couple of months, when we see the new report, we'll probably see some increased RMDs, since most occur in the fall. But again, we're happy that money in was higher than money out for the quarter. And then when your participants roll money out of the plan, we track them all, but only have room for 5 of the top 5 payees, and we list the vendor, the amounts, and then how many participants transferred into those vendors from the county. Then your plan itself, so we looked at new money. This is current existing money in the county's deferred compensation plan. So we saw that 52% of new money is going into target dates. 22.56% of your current assets are in target dates. About a fourth of your money, 25%, is in fixed. And then large cap funds have almost 35%. So it looks a little different with the existing assets versus how money is currently flowing in. But overall, things look really good. Let's skip a couple pages to loans. Not much in the loan category. We had 34 new loans this quarter. We closed off 16 loans, so we're adding more loans than we're closing off. But the current loan balance in the far upper right is roughly $9,400. So that's really consistent with what we see with other nationwide plans. The average loan that we see is around the country roughly 11,000. So you're a little bit under the sort of the nationwide average that we see with other plan sponsors, government specifically. So nothing really stands out with respect to loans themselves. So we'll go and move on to the enablement and engagement page. This is again something that we've added recently to our quarterly reports. This just shows that we have various forms of e-delivery, online enrollment, online distributions. Not all of these have been available for that long. E-delivery is growing in popularity. People can opt into this or opt out of paper. That's an option that they can do on the website. They can also opt back in if they wanted to. All of their statements are stored on the website, so you don't necessarily need a paper statement if you're delivery, but 72% of your participants are no longer getting a statement. For online enrollment, about 26% for that quarter enrolled online. The rest are enrolling through the traditional methods. And then online distributions, this is fairly new at the county, but it's taken off. So most of the distributions that we're seeing are done online, which we think is a little bit easier and faster than the traditional forms that Nationwide offers, which we still offer. Then on the upper right, we show other metrics. We have 90% of your beneficiaries on file, so that's a very healthy number. We have 90% of your emails on file. A lot of our marketing efforts are designed around email. And then for online accounts, we're also growing this number since we haven't had you for that many years, but we're already up to 63%. When we started, we were, I think, in the 40s. So we're also continuing to grow the online accounts that we have. And then the stats below, so My Interact Retirement Planner, that's the online software which shows a retirement readiness score. So 34% of your participants have used that, and that's since day one with Nationwide. And then My Investment Planner is free online advice, and we had 27 participants use that tool last quarter. And so that's a good place to go. If you're not sure what to do, you can go out there and get free advice. That's a one-time, point-in-time advice. So if you want to, you might want to go out there maybe each quarter, at least minimum once a year, to keep it going, to see if there's any changes that you need to make. But it's a great benefit Nationwide offers, so hopefully people take advantage of that. So on the 401A, this is just the overview. I won't go through all the slides, but the ending balance in your 401A plan at the end of the quarter was $32 million, 144 participants, 3 new enrollments. You can see the average balance very, very high in your 401A plan. We did have some contributions coming in and also some distributions going out and a few rollovers out. But overall, your 401A plan is also very healthy, just like your deferred comp plan. So I'm gonna pause to see. I know I went through a lot of these stats pretty quickly. I just wanted to pause and see if there's any questions about any of the Nationwide data for the third quarter.
I want to say great job on the reviews. It's nice seeing that, so we have a real-life, impartial, unbiased, census data about your performance, and so that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to thank you so far. The report's been already included issues we brought up before as far as questions we've had. Where's the money going out? What do they do when they pull money out? And that's been very responsive. Also, the month or the how much percentage upwise, we asked about that, and you were able to put it right on the app really quickly within a couple of weeks. So I just want to thank you for the responsiveness to really every request that I've seen asked of you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we're happy to help with those, and we're sorry it wasn't active. It should have been, but I'm glad you caught it and we can activate that. Yeah, I think we'd flip that on in a day or two, so appreciate you bringing that up to our attention. Yeah, and thanks for the compliments, Jason.
I have one question. So somebody brought it up. So I don't know if it's the regular retirement or deferred comp. Do you guys charge different municipalities different rates for running the accounts? Because he was saying that his wife worked in Sacramento and there was discrepancies and that their funds run cheaper than what we are. And I should have asked him specifically, but I thought I would just bring that up.
Sure, Paul. So is it the city or the county? For Sacramento?
I can
Only
find
asking
out. It was
because
one of
the
our
city is one of my
directors that said
plans.
it because his wife was there, and we were at a
Understand.
barbecue just, talking, and it came up, and he says, "Oh, well, my wife's is cheaper." You know what I mean? So it's
Sure.
something that I'll find out more.
I'm surprised it wasn't football.
Right? I'll find out. And
Yeah, so we have custom pricing and custom investments for every single one of our clients. So not every plan sponsor looks alike. I do work with the city of Sacramento, and they're also a highest client. The fund lineup is probably similar, but I'm not sure. And pricing is based on many assumptions and many factors. So when Nationwide or really any vendor prices out a plan, the first thing we look at is total assets. So the city of Sacramento, and again, I'm not sure if it's a city or if it's the county. The city has roughly close to 800 million in assets, so a couple hundred million more. They have roughly 5,000 participants. So we look at assets, participants, we look at average account balance, we look at distributions and cash flow, and we sort of crunch all that numbers. And then the city is also on a 5-year contract, so we price over the contract term. So everything is custom. All the investments are custom. So no two plans walk or talk or look alike. Yeah.
I was just curious, so I'll find out specifics
Yeah.
wise. That way.
Right. Yeah.
Appreciate
Any
it.
comments, Vincent? I'm not sure if I missed anything.
No, I wouldn't add anything at this point, but there is a section in my report where we do go over fees, and we can break that out and explain it better when you have the numbers in front of you, if that's okay.
I can also ask that, we were I didn't get specifics, because
Yeah.
we're having this meeting this week.
If it's the mutual funds, they might have a different fund lineup than what the county has, so the funds might be a little bit different. Sometimes too, they might have CITs if they're large enough to where you can get breakpoint pricing, and so there's maybe some different elements, but happy to discuss further, yeah.
Definitely, thank you.
And we'll get here in a second, but we talked just last meeting, I think, about guaranteed income, and then right here it is. Next time, here's a proposal, here's some information for our membership, that's excellent.
Is that,
Okay.
are we talking about?
So the next item, we have the Secure 2.0 Provision 328, which we discussed last quarter for public safety, and we wanted to bring it back as there was a lot of discussion last time. I think it was an agenda, or it wasn't an action item, and so it was added as an action item, so we just wanted to review that with you. Do you want to give a brief overview of that again, just kind
Sure.
of, just as a reminder? Okay.
So there's two pieces to this that I wanted to sort of lift up for the plan. As many of you know, I've been working with the county since 2009, so I know a lot about the legacy information. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about is the option for our public safety to have an in-plan withdrawal option available to them at age 50. That's something new, that's part of the Secure Act. So the county has always allowed age 59 and a half distributions for employees that are in service. That's not something that like we broadly advertise, but there have been great opportunities for me to, as I'm talking to different employees and they're looking for options for different things, like I had a gal come in and she's like, I'm getting ready to retire. I really don't want to have to take a loan out to put a $16,000 HVAC system in my house. And I said, well, you have this other option if you want to just take the cash. And she was thrilled. But back to public safety, we find that they retire at age 50. And a friend of mine from high school actually came back to work part-time as a bailiff. And what happens is when an employee here is active in any capacity, full-time, part-time, per diem, then that means that the lid stays on their retirement savings cookie jar. They cannot actually draw any money out because they're active with the county. So that kind of creates a special challenge for our retired public safety who want to come back. You know, they're sort of either in the situation where they can't now draw from the 457 plan because they're working per diem or part-time, or then that forces them to move their money somewhere else so that they have access to it. So I think it's a great retention opportunity for us so that they don't feel like they have to leave the plan to have access. They retain the 457 and all the benefits that are specific to public safety. So I would love to lift up and see us allow them the age 50 in-service withdrawal for our public safety.
So I appreciate that. I've been around a little bit longer than 2009, not much, but one thing that we used to see, and I'm wondering now if it's just like an urban legend type thing, is that our public safety people would take a one pay period break before they returned in a part-time status so they could access their deferred comp. But if I understand, you're saying if they come back in any capacity, once they've come back, they have no access.
Right, right. It's either lid on or lid off. There's no in between. In the past, working with Lori, we used to be more paper-based. So she could say, well, you're back, but as long as, you know, you're not contributing, we could sort of work with you. Now it's all electronic, so there's no gray area.
Okay.
And for public safety, the way it's currently situated, depending on your age when you retire and you come back, you have to take either a 90-day break or a one pay period break. And so that limits them to 6 pay periods or 1 pay period to get everything done they want to do for potentially years.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we know how many folks that would affect or range?
I don't know how many part-time and per diem we have in public safety. Maybe Jason has an idea?
I would estimate probably between transportation and court services, roughly 60. There's also a per diem and civil division. They're kind of scattered around, but the biggest majority would be the custody transportation unit and then the courthouse.
Quite a few annuitants is what we're talking about.
I'm sorry?
Retiree annuitants is what it's called, right?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's exactly what.
That's the term,
their
right?
full-time service is technically over and they want to come back and just kind of do something to help cover health insurance or cover golf fees. You know, that's what my friend Steve was doing, so,
Stay
One
engaged
number-
with their community.
yeah.
One number we can't capture, though, if we say, let's say it's about 60 right now, how many public safety employee vacancies do we have? Because people are unwilling to come back and not have deferred comp ability to adjust that and take any withdrawals. So
Right.
we could be losing on the hiring aspect too, and that's a number we really can't track at this point.
That's true.
And to me, I think if that is part of the group that's regularly transferring out, and that can help to, mitigate that, that would be beneficial as well.
If it's well advertised to them, that they no longer have to take it out to have access to it. I mean, that'll be, if the county agrees to do this, they need to make sure that it's
Yeah, I think
Information
When we
with,
get
well
something in
shared.
writing, we'd be happy to, I put it out, all network users for the sheriff's office, if that was acceptable to everybody. So that would get everybody on board at least now, and then also letting our professional standards division that does our hiring, let people know, hey, if you're coming from an outside agency, you can still be involved in deferred comp,
Yes.
withdrawing, adding to, and not have to have it frozen.
I often, because I work with other agencies, I often say to them, hey, you want some part-time work and you still want to save, go to San Joaquin County.
Yeah, this one's a no-brainer because, I mean, it really, you get rid of a barrier, because otherwise they're taking their money somewhere else. So
Exactly.
you weigh that out, it's like, okay.
Right, and they
And I mean,
lose, they
and we
lose,
could try it, you could reverse it, right? So you try it and
right.
there's no downside to it, correct?
No, and they lose, so if they move their money out of the 457, then they're no longer eligible for the $3,000 paid directly to them to cover their health insurance that they don't have to pay taxes on. So there's a lot of benefits for them to stay, so it's just getting them the options and the education, which I know Jason and his team are great about.
So this is an action item,
Yes.
so I move to approve.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
I do have one other item, and I just briefly lifted that up. So there's a HELPS provision where we can pay $3,000 per year out to our retirees. They do not have to pay taxes on it, and it's for the use of health insurance, which is high when you walk into retirement, especially at such a young age. Right now, in its current form, we have to send the check directly to Kaiser, or Blue Cross Blue Shield, and in my experience, it's administratively difficult. I have my friends that used to be my school resource officers, they were using this, and when the check goes to Kaiser or Blue Cross Blue Shield, unless it's got the member number on it, it gets sort of lost in the system. So one of the provisions of the Secure Act now allows us, with approval of the plan sponsor, to send the check directly to the retiree so that they can manage that and they receive it directly to cover. It's basically the honor system, but they can receive the money, and if they're filing their income taxes in a way where they're showing that they have to pay that money, then they don't have to pay taxes on the $3,000. So again, it's retention, it's a tax efficient spend down of the money for our public safety, and it's kind of a nice option. I've had several of my plans approve it already.
So one question I have is, if we have a retiree who's receiving benefits through a spouse, is that still, as long as it's just going to their household, it would still be, that wouldn't be like a violation of the?
Right, so when you have those medical expenses that are out of pocket, there's a form you file in your tax return that tells the IRS you have those expenses, and then you just couple the 1099 with it,
Okay.
and then no taxes are due.
Okay.
Yeah, but it just would be so much nicer and user-friendly for us to be able to send it directly to them so it doesn't get lost in the system. Also, it's for people that stay on the group health insurance plan. We can't send the money to a third-party administrator, so for employees that stay on the group health plan here at the county, it doesn't help them because we can't send the check to the TPA. We've got, this option would let them stay on the group plan, but then we can send the check directly to them to use. So it's really a win-win situation.
Move to approve.
I second, please.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, that's very exciting. So one of the things that I'm gonna let, John, I just wanna kind of kick off the conversation about the in-plan guarantee products. So the last time I was here, I had one of your managers come and see me. He's about $1 million, and he's getting close to retirement, so he's been talking to financial advisors. And one of the questions he posed to me is there an investment option that Nationwide offers that I can get some payout on my money guaranteed for the rest of my life? We found that when COVID hit, a lot of the money exiting the deferred compensation plans was going into annuity products, a way for people to kind of secure their income for the future. And we all know that annuity products in the retail space have, you know, lots of catches, contingent deferred sales charges, they're very expensive, and the money leaves the plan. So in a retention effort, I lifted this up to John and I said, you know, what can we offer to kind of give the employees here one more option, one more reason to stay in the plan, and a way that would benefit them. And I have this investment in other plans. It's sort of pension mirroring. It's an Income America product called 5 for Life, and I see a lot of people really kind of gravitating to it. People like me, I've got 10 years in public service. I've got 10 years with CalPERS. That's not going to be enough. So if my own 457 plan had a product like this, I would be on it. So John's got a brochure I think he's going to share, a couple of things he wants to mention.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll start just by asking if there's any questions. I know that there was just a NAGNA conference. The topic was discussed there a little bit about in-plan guarantees. It's sort of a newer concept allowed by the Secure Act, which now allows plan sponsors to add these types of products in. Are there any questions at all about sort of the concept of them or how they work?
They're not, how do they guarantee it though? Because it's an investment based, right?
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
the bottom falls out, my brother does it and it works very well because a lot of times he gets greater return than they project.
Yeah.
But there's a risk of, if the wheels fall off.
So yeah, there's risks, and there's always going to be a risk. It's all about how the product's created. Nationwide has several of these types of products, and I brought forth Income America because it's our simplest product. It's also our most popular product that we have. We have others, and one that might be a great fit here too is I didn't bring a brochure because we don't have a brochure. It's a brand new product, but Income America pays 5% for life, and that's regardless of market fluctuation. So these products are designed for a retiree that wants to set up another form of lifetime income. It's not for the 25-year-old or the 45-year-old person who wants to be in the stock market. This is a very specific product for a very specific person, and this one in particular, it starts at age 65 and then it pays 5% forever. And even if the market crashes, if the market goes up, they're still getting 5%. And so it's a very simple product. It's a target date fund which is managed through American Century, and it's insured by both Nationwide and also Lincoln Financial. So it's got what's called wraps. There's 2 insurance wraps on it. There's a cost to hedge, which is the insurance component, and then there's a cost for the investment also. But it's going to pay 5% net of all that. So the participant, at age 65, at least in this product, there's what's called a high water mark set. So your balance at 65, that is what the 5% is based on. And as long as you don't take withdrawals, then you're going to get that same 5% for life. Now the money's in the plan, so if you wanted to take it out, some of it out, all of it out, if you wanted to take a loan, if you wanted to buy a boat, you can take money because the money's still in one of the investment options in your plan. So it's really designed to conserve assets and to compete against those annuities, which we're seeing when people roll out, the money's gone. The money stays in. It also goes to your beneficiary if something happens to you. So again, it's a very narrow product for a very specific person, but it's a guaranteed product like a fixed fund, but it's gonna outperform the fixed fund most of the time, and it'll have no market fluctuation. Just get 5% for the life of the product. So that is one that's very popular. I know that's a very high level overview of it. We have a product brochure. If no one wants it, fine. It sounds like there's someone that has some interest in it, so.
Yeah, and I also see it as a great, well, it's great as an extension for a pension, because it is pension mirroring. So an employee could take it 5% at age 65, or they can, it's either like straight or joint. The other option is you take a smaller or reduction, you get 4% guaranteed for the rest of your life, but then your spouse also receives that if something happens to you. And then once that spouse is no longer available, the cash would go through to your beneficiaries. So it's great as a Social Security replacement plan, especially for some of our public safety that don't have that option available to them here. It's great for retention, it's low cost. People aren't bound by the fees and charges that they would have in a traditional annuity. So there just is a lot of nice opportunity there for people who are looking for something like an annuity to stay in the plan with the lower fees and charges.
Could you explain for me how this would look and operate from a participant? Because you're saying it's not for your 25 or 45-year-olds, so how does it, like on a practical level?
Yeah, so when a participant invests and they go out to the list of options, this would be one of the investment options, and there'd be a lot of disclaimer language around what they're getting into, so they wouldn't stumble upon this. It's another target date fund, so they would see that Income America product as one of their options. So they could put money in it at 30 or 40 or 50. We don't recommend that. They're going to be highly counseled on it. We'll recommend against it because they don't need it. But it'll just show as an investment option in the plan, and that's pretty much it. So that's how it'll look from the participant point of view.
So would, is it typical for people to put like a portion of their assets into this one?
You
And
could
And
you
what
could
time, because
defer
you're
to
saying
it.
not for your, even for your 50-year-olds, what time would you say
Yeah.
somebody make a move like that?
So what I'm seeing, Merced Superior Court just adopted this, but then they also adopted a component where it's a qualified, it automatically moves to this product at age 50. So for people who enroll and don't pick an investment and they're in that standard target date fund, they stay in that nice low target date fund until age 50. And then at age 50, when they hit that qualifying age, then if they've made no investment changes, then we automatically put them in this more protected product. And the way this works is it has those annual high water marks on their birthday. So if there's a peak, it kind of comes up to the peak and sort of secures it. And then that happens every year. So there is a kind of a protection component. And then if they hit age 65 and they're not ready to take the amount yet, they can actually continue to put money in and then trigger the payout later on in life. But 65 is when it's designed to begin because it's kind of close to when people are getting Medicare and Social Security benefits.
Yeah, and it wouldn't start until 65. So if you retired, say at 55, you'd still have to wait 10 years. So probably the closest to 65 would be the best time. You could do some of your money, all your money. You can make direct contributions into it like any other investment option. It looks and acts like any other investment option, except it really isn't. It's again, only for those people who want that 5% guarantee. And if they get in it and they realize and they meet with Brenda and say, well, what is this Income America? Did I do something wrong? And she'd say, well, this is what it is. If they don't want it, she would just transfer them, or she would show them how to then transfer out of it to another investment option. So there is no obligation. You're not locked in. None of that applies.
Yeah.
So you can transfer in, transfer out at will, just like any other investment option.
Yeah. But it's a simple, balance protection and future income opportunity that, for some people who don't spend their, they don't have 30 years of service and they retire, or they don't have Social Security to fall back on, it's just a nice option for them.
There's no penalty to get out, so I
No.
mean, you wanna jump ship, you can get out whenever.
Yeah, and I mean, you're much better off in the other target date funds that are currently in the plan. They're much less expensive, a better place to be. So you'd only want this if you wanted that lifetime income. Otherwise, this is not something that you would want. With the cost structure in place, with the investments that are overseen by highest group, it's a better place to be. But it does solve a need, even though the need might be sort of limited, but that need could exist, and so this would take care of that.
That'd be good for retention.
The trick is then to keep up our retention, because if we have plan leakage, if we have too many people leaving before this, kind of be, self-limiting, I suppose, so.
What's your average balance do you see in these accounts?
It depends. I had a guy over at one of my cities put in like 50% of his balance, so he did like 100,000, and he was super excited about it because his wife had no pension. And I tend to see that where one employee in a family has great benefits and the other one really doesn't have anything, and they're really relying on their partner that has the government pension and the government plans like this to kind of carry them into retirement. So it's great for that type of situation as well.
Low risk.
Yeah, it's a guaranteed 5%, so it's considered a fixed income product. The only, so folks would say, what's the downside, right? I mean, there's portability, so people ask, well, what if we leave Nationwide someday? Please don't. But if you select another vendor, what if they want to roll their money out of the plan? What can they do? Those types of questions. The product is this particular product is record kept by some of our competitors. Not every competitor has this one. They might have their own. It'll be similar. So if a new record keeper doesn't offer this particular product and you move the money over to them, then it would be transferred into their version of this if they had one. And if they didn't, then the money would just be liquidated, and then it would just go into probably another target date fund that doesn't have the income. Or they could, if they're eligible for an IRA rollover, there are IRAs that would allow them to roll over and pick up something like this. So portability is not really kind of strong as we speak, because not every vendor offers these products, and if they do, they're probably not the same. So that, not as a downside, but something to consider on the back end. But if they're in Income America, they're gonna get that 5% for life, so.
Does Highest have any concerns that we haven't addressed?
Yeah, so taking a step back, I think this is maybe taking a step back, probably 5-10 years ago, and John alluded to this, or actually Brenda, the positives, John, some of the negatives. And some of the negatives were around portability. The other was around a single issuer risk, meaning basically they're guaranteed, but they're guaranteed by one company. And some of these 100-year-old financial institutions could be weakened, as we saw in the last financial crisis. Portability was an issue. Fiduciary responsibility. This was probably the biggest one, because as a consultant, we would have to now become almost like an insurance company analyst, or you would have to at least gauge the appropriateness of not. A lot of these have been diminished by the survivor benefits, the portability issue. The really nice thing is Secure Act 1.0 came out with some fiduciary relief. Essentially, instead of us collectively as fiduciaries, insurance company experts, there was this pretty straightforward checklist. There's 9 or 11 things that we have to check off to get fiduciary relief. So said another way, I have 2 clients that have this type of product, not this particular one, but this type of product. And in terms of adoption, it's less than 10% of assets. So you can look at it one of 2 ways. As a plan, 3 to 5% of the assets are not that much, and we're not going to get adoption, so maybe it's not that popular. Or you can look at it from the bottom up. The people with the 3 to 5% of assets are pretty meaningful to them. And so nonetheless, the adoption is gonna be great, but it could be important for those people. The important part is every year we pull out that checklist mandated by Secure 1.0 and have a conversation with the insurance company and say, okay, are all these things being met perfectly? We'll add it to the file, and it does provide that fiduciary relief. So there are some potential issues, but there are also some potential advantages as well. I hope that helps.
So I guess I'm not sure if the committee is leaning one way or another, but one of the questions I would have would be, you've brought us this one, are there other ones we should be considering, or did you bring this one because you think it's the best option, or?
Thank you. This one is our most popular option. It's the simplest to understand. There is another version similar to this, which is called Retirement Income Builder, and it pays a target of 6%. And then when the equity portion hits zero at some point, and it might not ever hit zero, but if it does, then you're gonna get a target of 4.5. And that is a passive, indexed version of something like this, which is similar. It's also a target date suite, again, called Retirement Income Builder. That is a newer product, and we didn't have any information on it as of the meeting today. It's something that we're rolling out now. The fees are lower because it's a index-based product. So that might be also something that you'd want to consider. Would also be a really good choice for your employees. The Income America product's been around for a couple of years, and it's kind of a tried and true product out there. It's been adopted by Fidelity recently. So it's, again, common. The fees are a little higher than the other product that we have because, again, every product's different. So I would also consider Retirement Income Builder, and I can bring more information on that if the committee wants to see that one. So a couple to choose from. There's another version called Lifetime Income Builder, which is a actively managed target date. So we have an actively managed version, we have a passively managed version, very similar but lower cost with the passive. So I'd probably want to lean that way for the county instead of the actively managed version, which we've had for about a year available to you.
So the biggest difference that I see between this, we have a Lifetime Income Builder at City of Lodi, is it doesn't have the component for the spouse. It's not straight or joint, it's just you. And if something happens to you, your spouse gets any remaining cash. So this is more pension mirroring than the other products.
Yeah.
I like the concept. I think for some of our membership that doesn't either want to spend the time or energy to research investments, doesn't feel comfortable playing the market as much, and with the ups and downs of somebody, there are folks that are just wired where they just want stability. I think this or something similar to this would be a good option, is worth exploring.
I have another question for you. On the, you were saying, I think you said it was Merced Court who has it, like, for the people who never select
Yes.
for the default.
Right.
For our plan, do we have an idea of what that number would even look like?
Well, you probably saw how high when people enroll in the plan, they're not selecting, they're using the target date funds. And so that could be a pretty good amount of people if they never make a change, never meet with me, because sometimes people will set it and forget it. So it could definitely be beneficial to those employees, just in terms of protecting balances from age 50 forward and then giving them that guaranteed lifetime income. So, yeah.
To be honest, it's one of the things that actually makes me a little bit more concerned, because then really the committee is deciding, I mean, it's one thing to say, if you don't pick an investment, we're going to pick a very low cost, diversified approach. But I guess the default of it to move to this makes me a little bit reluctant.
Yeah, so
And he's
that's
saying
an
no.
optional piece.
Okay.
That's an optional piece. So the first component would be let people have it available in case they want it. Then the second component is whether or not the employer wants to let people who've never made that decision move to something that's more protected at age 50. So it's kind of up to each employer to choose what they want to adopt. Yeah, it's just a choice.
Having just come from NAGDA and hearing a whole bunch of presentations for 4 days, everybody seems to start as the default in the target date fund, so I really like that idea. I would be opposed to starting this for these people. I think you minimize the upsides for them for potentially decades. So, and you just said the ideal time to come into this would be at 65. So I think we keep the target date fund as the initial, and we keep, going on with that. But this is to me, it's worth exploring. And I think for some folks, it would be really great to know it's 5%, it's 5%, it's 5%.
Yeah, it's simple.
I would be interested in getting more information on the other ones you talked about. That 52% of people that are in the target funds, most of them don't have the wherewithal, the extra knowledge it takes. It's tough. Even when you come to these meetings and learn stuff, you go home and go, I sure hope I'm still doing it right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And they're excellent. I mean, Highest does a great job of selecting the investments. Those target dates are very low cost, very good place to be.
Well, and when you start young, it all adds up anyway.
Absolutely.
And that's the key, that it takes a while for people to understand.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in hearing about the other funds you talked about.
Yeah, happy to. We'll have some materials that we can forward on. So that would be another really good choice. There are some differences, but we can cover those. But I appreciate the time.
I have a question. How long has that county employee worked here to have $1 million in deferred comp?
I know.
And how many of those folks
We've
do
got
we
a-
have?
We've got a lot.
Huh?
About 25 years.
Yeah.
But he's not the only one with balance like that. I see people with those balances. I had a retiree come in that had a lot in her account as well. So, yeah, it's not just about retaining the active employees, but giving the retirees an option and a reason to stay. I'm hoping at some point I'll get to go to the retiree luncheon to let our retirees know that that's, I spoke with Lois Sehun recently and told her I had a lot of interest in it. She seems to be connected with that. So hopefully at some point I'll get the opportunity to speak with our retirees about all the great things that we've been doing since Nationwide's taken over, all the changes and upgrades.
So I think if the committee's comfortable with this, maybe we could agendize this for the next meeting and have maybe a little bit more of a breakdown of the options and the pros and cons of the different products. And I would like to understand how many, if we can find out, I know we know how many people are in target funds, but how much are really people who've never made a selection? Before we make a decision about that piece of it, I'd like to understand.
Yeah, and
Small
I don't
number,
know
big
about
number.
the putting people in there automatically too. 'Cause
Yeah.
that, I mean, when you talk retirement, it causes people anxiety, right? They're just worried about working and making money and, so how do you help that anxiety with people and, worrying about the future, I think is a bigger concern too. The services that you give them and how you, teach them that. Because if you've been in private sector, there's, not a lot of this, so.
True.
A lot of people don't know what they have and the access to how many different plans until you come to meetings like this, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you do and the outreach that you do, but I mean, most people, and, they worry about their check and their bills now.
Sure.
Yeah, they're not,
No.
forecasting, which is hard, so.
And I would bet, Jennifer, that there's probably very few that have defaulted over the years, just
Yeah.
because our enrollment process requires an investment option when they sign up. They have to select something, so we probably don't have many, but we can.
Okay.
But we can definitely run a report and see.
Yeah, I personally think that the amount is fairly high, just knowing the history of the plan.
Okay.
And I personally, when we have our new employee orientation, I send out our easy enrollment form because being in that chair years ago myself, I didn't know what to pick, but I knew I should do it because my mom was like, hey, you should. So when I send that out to them, those enrollments that are not online and even the ones that are now, they default to the target date fund because the average person, they know they want to save, but they don't know what to pick. So we use that age-based option to help everyone. So I think the percentage is probably higher than we would imagine. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, next is Highest third quarter performance report.
Great, thank you very much. And is there extra reports? Or does Nationwide, do you have our reports?
I don't, but it's fine.
Okay.
Oh, if there's an extra, great. If not, totally fine.
Oh, yeah, you could, I can go get more. There's
Oh.
extra.
That's okay.
Thank you. You follow along. Okay. So go ahead and turn into your report. There are two, one's a little bit thicker. This is the September 30th performance report. I do have data as of September 30th, but I also have some updated numbers because the markets continue to rally, especially in the stock market, and the economy is in this, we've settled into this Goldilocks economy, not too hot, not too cold. There has been a continuation of this roll down that the Fed likes to use, this soft landing, if you will, where at the onset of this inflationary environment, the Federal Reserve aggressively raised interest rates over a short period of time. And the number one concern was when you try to slow down the economy by raising interest rates, we're going to throw it into a recession. And Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed, said, hold on, we're going to achieve this soft landing. And a lot of doubters were in the works because they failed miserably on the beginning. And so there wasn't a lot of confidence, but it does seem like the Federal Reserve through Jerome Powell and the policies for monetary has been succeeded. Go ahead and turn into your reports, past the text-heavy narrative, pages 1 through 3, and land on page 4. I do want to talk about this Goldilocks economy or this soft landing that we're seeing. The chart on the upper left is gross domestic or GDP. What we take a look at are two numbers. The black line or the solid line is the dollar value of all the goods and services produced in the United States in any given year. And that corresponds to the left-hand vertical axis, and that's why you'll see the dollar signs in billions. But most economists not only view this chart as a good measure of our economic activity, they focus more on the lightly dotted line. This is the year-over-year change or data as of third quarter compared to third quarter of 2023. A definition of Goldilocks economy as measured by GDP is anywhere from 2 to 3% growth rate. And the percentage is on the right-hand side, vertical axis, and we did achieve this in the first couple quarters of 2024. First quarter came in at 1.4, so a little bit low, but that actually translated to good news because that was ammunition for the Federal Reserve to continue its stance on lower interest rates as the calendar year moved from 24 to 25. The second quarter final number came in at 3.0%. Again, attestation that we're settling in this Goldilocks economy with a 3% number that's not too hot, but rather expanding. So that's relatively good news from our economic output. The job numbers continue to do very, very well, and I'm pivoting to the chart on the upper right. The unemployment rate. A measure of full employment is an unemployment rate of 5%. We haven't seen that number in about 3 years. It has ticked up a little bit. The latest read nationally is 4.2%. Here locally in the county, it's a little bit higher at 6.8%, but still relatively healthy nationally from a jobs number, and wages continue to impress on the upside. So relatively good news from a labor standpoint. And then in addition to the jobs numbers, the Federal Reserve also looks at what things cost. We call that inflation, or the consumer price index is but one measure of inflation. The Federal Reserve has an explicit target of a 2% inflation. If you remember, a couple years ago, it was at 9.1%, which was a 40-year high. Thanks to those aggressive interest rate hikes to try and cool down the economy, the latest read is 2.4%. So close to the 2% target, but it was close enough that the Federal Reserve signaled mission accomplished by doing what a couple weeks ago? Lowering rates for the first time in a number of years. In fact, they surprised. They didn't lower it. They call it measured. They didn't lower it 25 basis points. They actually decreased it by 50 basis points. And so they dropped it pretty significantly for first time lowering interest rates as part of an economic cycle. Looking into our crystal ball through the futures markets, when the Federal Reserve meets in November, they're going to have another 25 basis point reduction. So a smaller one, but another reduction, and then another 25 basis point reduction in December. So 50 basis points through 2 cuts throughout the rest of the year. So good news there.
I
Yeah.
have a question. So that, I don't understand that dotted blue line. So that was just last year's number, so you're talking GDP and all these numbers? So what does that mean? So this year,
on the
gross domestic is up to 15%, but last year was the dotted blue line
For what chart?
for the gross domestic product?
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, for
okay.
all of them, because I mean, so that was just last year at this time's number?
No,
Or you're
the
doing averages?
The dotted line is the year-over-year change since the fourth quarter of 2019. So we just track it quarter in and quarter out. And that corresponds to the right-hand column on each of the charts. So for gross domestic product, the latest read is about a 3% number, and you can see it in between the 0 and the 5% on the right-hand side. Does that make sense or no?
No, I'm still, so you're at 15%, so that was based on the fourth quarter of 19?
And I apologize. Are you saying up here, the
Yeah,
15%?
so you're at 15, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately, you're using the solid line with the blue legend. The solid line actually corresponds to over here, and that's the dollar value.
Dollar, okay.
Yes.
All right.
So that black line
Oh,
at
so it's
the
not
very right
differences, okay.
is about $23 trillion in economic output in goods and services.
Got it, okay.
Yes, yes.
So we're not tracking differences, we're tracking two different variables.
Correct.
Okay.
The solid line is the dollar value.
Okay.
The lightly dotted line, which is the blue, is the year-over-year change.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
Sorry, that was
No.
no question, but I was like, okay, wait, I don't understand this.
I'm glad you did,
Thank
yeah. Other questions? Okay, but here's the rub with the interest rate reduction. There are a number of interest rates. When people talk about interest rates, is it the short term or the overnight rate that the Federal Reserve controls? Or is it the 10-year Treasury or the 2-year Treasury or even the 30-year Treasury? Weirdly enough, the 10-year Treasury generally moves in sympathy with the overnight rate until this time. Because of this interest rate environment and the economic cycle, the Fed lowered interest rates on the overnight side by 50 basis points, but the 10-year Treasury went from 3.6 to 4.2 over the last couple of weeks. So it was actually working in opposite direction. And now finally, because of this relatively Goldilocks economy, we saw this inversion of the yield curve actually look more normalized. And so that's where we're taking a look at the longer term vision of the economy and maybe to a certain extent the presidential election, but interest rates actually moved in opposite directions for the first time in a very, very long time. So what does that mean? As interest rates ticked up, the 10-year Treasury moved over 4%. We saw some weakness in the bond market since September 30th, and I'll talk about that here on the next page. So take a look at page 5. For the quarter, the bond market performed phenomenally. The chart on the upper left of page 5, second line down, the Bloomberg US aggregate is a good measure of our bond market and historically has averaged 3.5% positive for the year. Take a look at for the quarter. This is just the third quarter or the 3-month period from July 1st to September 30th, up almost 5.25%. Absolutely phenomenal. The year to date, 4.5%, which is nice. The downside is, given that week 2022, where rates ticked up significantly, still negative 1.4% annualized. But what's really telling is since September 30th, where we saw a 4.5% return, year to date, as of yesterday, the ag is 2.3%. So almost a 2% swing in the year to date number, given that spike in 10-year Treasury yields. And so the window of refinancing your home probably went away since the interest rate decrease out of the Federal Reserve. About halfway down, you'll see the Bloomberg US TIPS Index. That stands for Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. Another phenomenal quarter, up over 4%, bringing the one-year number to 9.8% on that TIPS index. And then last but not least, the high yield index. This is the junk bond sector of the fixed income asset class. For the quarter, up 5.8%, year to date 8%, 15.74% for the year. Absolutely nice, impressive return out of the junk bond space. As of this week, the high yield index is positive 7.5%. So a little bit of slippage compared to the 8% number in the book. That's the bond market. So some mixed messages since quarter end, but the stock market, which is on the next page, page 6, the first line on the upper right, S&P 500 continues to march and beat records. These are 500 large US companies. So for the quarter, up 5.9%, the year-to-date number, 22%, the one-year number, 36.35%. Just take a look at the year-to-date number, 22.08, as of yesterday, 24.0%. So a little bit of increase since quarter end as of yesterday. So nice continuation of the domestic or US stock market. And the news continues on the next page, page 7. There are about 45 countries outside the US with an investable stock market, so Brazil, China, Taiwan. The first line on the upper left, the ACWI or ACWI, the All-Country World Index minus United States, finished the quarter up over 8%. The year-to-date number 14.25%, and the one-year number 25.35%. There has been a little bit of slippage. Year-to-date, the ACWI ex-US as of yesterday, 10.7%. So about a 3% drop since September 30th, but nonetheless up double digits year-to-date. So questions, comments? Okay. Go ahead and flip to the next section, page 9. This is the combined report. John does a good job highlighting the nationwide stats, so I'll be brief on highlighting a couple or as repeats of Nationwide's report. But nonetheless, the executive summary, if you will, on page 9, you can see the combined market value of the two plans, the 457 and the 401A, that pie chart. About 40% of the assets are invested in those large cap funds. These are the funds that invest in those large company household names like Nike, FedEx, ExxonMobil. But you have about a quarter of the assets in the navy blue portion, which are the fixed income. These are those bond funds. And then the yellow portion are the asset allocation models. About a quarter of the assets are in those target date products. And then the other asset classes, you can see the smaller slivers of the pie chart there. And then moving to the left-hand side under plan notes, there is a search document that we're presenting for the real estate asset class. Technically, it's real estate investment trust. So I don't want you to think that we're investing directly in real estate, but that's the asset category that we're going to take a look at in terms of different managers. Also at a fund level, MetWest and the Nuveen High Yield Fund. Those two funds were replaced in the middle of July. And then John mentioned the CITs. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the mutual fund version versus CITs here in a minute. And then from a governance standpoint, you can see the investment policy statement was updated. And then from a vendor management, if there's anything related to Highest Group or Nationwide, we call that out. And Brenda did a good job talking about some of the provisions there. And last but not least, from a fund note standpoint, unfortunately, MFS Mid-Cap Growth, the investment strategy focuses on very, very high quality, mid-cap, aggressive growth companies. And in this market cycle, that fund has struggled a bit. And as a candidate for watch status, we don't have any long-term concerns with the staff or the strategy. It just in this market cycle has underperformed. And so our recommendation is to simply place that fund on watch status. A little bit different with the Invesco Real Estate. This is a fund that was placed on watch in the third quarter of 23. Given its sector allocation, underweight more of the economically sensitive sectors of the real estate market, most notably malls. Also, in August, the Chief Investment Officer, Darren Turner, announced his retirement, so he's no longer there. And just those confluence of events, our recommendation is to replace that fund. And again, we have that search document for you. So then moving briefly, like I said, I'll skip a lot of the data points, so we'll skip pages. If you take a look at the bottom portion of page 10, this is the 457 plan. From an investment standpoint for the quarter, the plan was up 4.5%. I'm on the bottom left and focusing on the navy blue portions or columns, if you will. For the year, the 457 investments were up almost 21.5%. Annualized over 3 years, 5.7%, and over 5 years, annualized 8.5%. And the 3 and the 5 year can count the 2022, and so invariably they're going to be lower. Plus, as you broaden out the time horizon, performance generally gets muted. But nonetheless, 8.5% annualized over 5 years is pretty impressive, especially over the 1 year, 21.5% or 21.28%. Flipping ahead to page 11, About the third line down, you'll notice the Vanguard Federal Money Market. This was added almost a year ago, November 10th. You can see as of quarter end, $4 million went into that fund and added about a year ago. Less than 1%, but still $4 million, probably chasing those relatively high money market yields of about 5.25%. With the Federal Reserve decision to lower rates, rates on that product will drop, but still just over 4.5% is still pretty compelling, where the fixed income account is paying 2.6%. And then towards the bottom of page 11, you can see $130 million in the target date models. These are the asset allocation funds managed by T. Rowe Price. And then last but not least, under specialty, middle part of page 12, you can see the Invesco real estate, about $2 million or 1/3%, 0.34% of the assets in that real estate fund managed by Invesco that we just talked about. And then what's also impressive, flip ahead to page 13, almost directly in the middle, you can see the cash flow summary. What we do, similar to what John was reporting, all the contributions in the 457, taking out all the distributions. And it's not too surprising that the fourth quarter, as John alluded to with the uptick in RMDs, required minimum distributions, those are generally higher. Take a look, $10 million more left the plan than went in the fourth quarter of 23. Then in the first quarter, only $3.7 million more left the plan, hence the parentheses. And then in the second quarter, $623,000 more left the plan. But the nice thing, no parentheses in the third quarter. Whether that trend continues or not, just kudos to the strategy, nationwide, whatever, that more money went into the 457 than left. And again, I think that even though it's only $130,000, it's a huge feat that it's cash flow positive for the first time in a long time. Okay, and then take a look at page 15. This is somewhat just the growth rate of the 457 over the last several years. You can see $443 million at the end of 2019. Back to my point about that very, very weak 2022, both in the stock and bond markets. And then that high water mark, $576 million at the end of the third quarter. And then the 401A plan on page 16. Briefly, you can see, again, bottom half, navy blue columns. For the quarter, up 5.2%. For the 1 year, 27.7%. Pretty impressive. And then annualized over 3 years, 6.4%. And then annualized over 5 years, just over 10%. Flipping ahead to 17, about $8.5 million in the target date models. And then the Invesco real estate, a little bit more from a percentage standpoint, 0.8% of assets in the 401A, or about $257,000 in that real estate investment trust fund managed by Invesco. And then probably equally important, that forfeiture account, just under $80,000 there. And then from a planned growth standpoint, you can take a look at page 21. At the end of 2019, just over $18 million. A little bit of retrenchment in 2022, but at the end of the third quarter, just over $32 million in the 401A program. And then on page 22, this is the somewhat high-level overview of the performance of the funds. What we do is we take all the investment options. On page 22, upper half, these are the actively managed funds. The bottom portion are the passively managed index funds. And then on page 23 are the target date models. And what I want you to focus in on the two right-hand columns where there's a lot of blue, that means the metrics have been satisfied or the funds are in compliance with the metrics in your investment policy statement. But there's two red dots, as I said, MFS mid-cap growth, given its focus on high-quality companies, plus about a 10% allocation to the international markets. Those were drags on performance. And so over the 5-year period, It's lagging the benchmark, but also below median, and so our recommendation is to place that fund on watch, as I said. And then the second one is the real estate fund managed by Invesco, but significant underperformance, and with the departure of Darren, it was time to replace.
What's the, you talked about median, what's that?
Yeah, so median is basically Morningstar takes all the real estate funds in the universe and sorts them by performance over 5 years. And our expectation for an actively managed fund is over a full market cycle or 5 years, the fund should beat the benchmark and be in the upper median of its peers or other similarly strategy fund or other funds that invest in real estate investment trusts. And so if it drops below the median in that stacking or ranking, that's where it shows red. And you can see the Invesco fund is 84th percentile. So over 5 years, in that peer group or similarly strategy funds, it was ranked 84th out of 100.
The benchmark is what?
Good question. So flip ahead to conveniently at the top of page 29. There in that, mine is blue, maybe teal or light blue, the Invesco Real Estate Fund. And in that blue row, these are the performance net of fees over different time periods. So quarter, year to date, 1, 3, 5, 10, and then over different calendar years. Directly beneath that is the index specific to that particular fund or strategy. So it's the Dow Jones US Select Real Estate Investment Trust, or REIT, Total Return Index.
So then what happened in 2022?
Again, that was the recovery, and so because it was tied more towards the economically sensitive part, it participated in that rally. So it was the 9th percentile, but it lost almost 25%. And so you think that's not really good, but the index lost more, or 1.5%. And so that's why it's important to know the reasons why it underperformed or outperformed. But yeah, it was in the upper decile by losing 24.49%. But then take a look at 2023. It went from almost first to almost worst. It gained almost 10%, but the benchmark was up 13.96 and was in the 95th percentile. So this is why, again, the challenge is to recover, especially when it's 72nd over 10 years, lagging the benchmark by 44 basis points. It's time to move on.
Moving on or watching?
We're moving on. Well, our recommendation is to move on. Whether you decide to adopt that or not, that's up to you.
We've been tracking that for a while. Do you want to, are we motioning that now, or?
I think
More
that
discussion?
is part of the next part of his.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, no, thank you. Good tee up, but I also want to discuss the fee structure. Because almost like interest rates, you really have to drill down on what fees are. And I appreciate yeah, like John said, most barbecues, the talk is politics or religion or football or retirement plan fees. No, I love, well, yeah, I love it. But take a look at the next section on page 30. Fees are a kind of nebulous concept, but we break it down because not only is it our job, but it is a fiduciary responsibility. Page 30. So I think the high level context of this is the length of the bar charts are getting lower, meaning the fees are getting lower over time. So the component of the column, if you will, they're made up of 3 sections. The light blue portion are the investment fees. These are the fees that participants pay the fund managers directly, and some would say not knowingly, because you'll never see this on their statement. The fund manager simply deducts her or his fee out of the performance before giving you your return, positive or negative. So the fund manager collects the performance fee out of the return. That's the light blue portion. And you can see at the end of 2019, investment costs were 37.5 basis points, and now they're 34. So a reduction there at the investment side. The navy blue portion is what the committee uses for plan-related expenses. This is the component that participants do see on their statement. And the only requirement from a fiduciary or reasonable standpoint is that fees in the navy blue portion have to benefit the participant. And so whether it be training, consultant, NAGDA conference, whatever that is, that's what this bucket is for. And then the revenue requirement, what Nationwide collects, is the orange portion. And you can see that fee went down from 5 basis points down to 2.25, and we round up, but it's 2.25. So when you tack on the 2.25 Nationwide revenue requirement plus the 3.5 plan-related excess revenue, participants are seeing 5.75 basis points or 0.0575% deducted from their accounts on a regular basis. So fees have dropped, and this is where I think it'd be good to conceptualize, like, what fees are you talking about? Is it the overall? Is it the tack-on fee? Because as we flip into the next page, this could be one of the potential issues with the fee structure here. On page 31 at the top, you'll notice the Nationwide fixed account is this implied fee of 40 basis points. And so I don't want to pick on Nationwide, but most of the insurance provider record keepers have a fixed or general account, but it's a spread product. And so there's no explicit fee of 40 basis points. We're assuming that through years of experience where we say prices plan with this fund or without this fund. And we assume or estimate that the true cost is about 40 basis points. But it's just a true an estimate. Because it's a spread product, you get the declared rate, or your participants get a declared rate last year of 2.6%. The cost of running that general account is really nowhere to be disclosed. But in the interest of figuring this out, we have to assume a 40 basis point expense ratio. And this is where it could artificially inflate compared to Sacramento, whether it be city of or county of. But it's another component of analyzing the fees to make sure that they're reasonable. But nonetheless, because of the length of the investment menu, it ticks down from page 31 down to 32. The important part is the second to right-hand column. These are all the investment costs that the participants are paying, and they're explicit. And then when you look at the middle of page 32, we sum that up on a weighted basis of 34 basis points, or 0.34%, or just under $2 million a year. Then we keep moving into that revenue requirement of 2.25 basis points. Nationwide is collecting $129,680 a year, or $32,420 a quarter, or about $18 per head. And then in the form of that 3.5 basis point navy blue portion, the plan is collecting about $201,000 for plan-related expenses a year, $50,000 a quarter, or about $27 per head.
What feeds the Nationwide fixed account?
What do you mean? Sorry.
What, that number, the 141,824, what feeds that?
Oh, that's the dollar value of all the participants' money by choosing that investment as a component or all of their 457 balance.
Okay.
So there's of San Joaquin County's 457 plan, $141 million is in that product.
Okay, and the rating for that money, it was on what chart? For the fixed chart? Is that what we're looking at?
The rating in terms of performance?
Right, this isn't,
Yeah, it would be up on top of page 24.
and how much does that fluctuate usually? That's for, okay.
Given the structure of that portfolio, I would say it fluctuates very little. It's designed to be, and I hate using this term, a battleship, or a cruise ship. It's really, really hard to control. It's massive, probably $9 billion, $12 billion in that product. But billions of dollars, about a 6 duration, fixed income, high quality. Okay, $40 billion very high-quality portfolio. It's going to move very, very little or slowly.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
And you may know this, Brenda, but I believe historically that was the default, was people went into the fixed account previously before, no? Okay, yeah.
Well, I
I
think,
think historically it was.
yeah, as an industry, a lot of fiduciaries said, let's play it safe, have a capital preservation or fixed account as the default, and then participants, once they get educated, they'll move it to something better.
Yeah.
But no one, or seldom ever did. I think a couple things, inertia, but they felt, participants nationally felt like, well, this was a default, it must be right, and so there was that approval. But yes, at the county, they moved it years ago to the target date funds. Yeah. So that participants can get a little upside as opposed to 3% a year consistently. Questions on the 457? Okay, moving to the next page, 33. This is the 401A. Investment cost went from 38.3 down to 35.9. Similar to the 457, the navy blue portion went from 3.9 down to 3.5 basis points. And the budget from 3.9 to 3.5. The revenue requirement from 5.1 down to 2.25. And then the investment costs haven't changed, but you can see the weighted cost on page 35 is 35.9 basis points or $115,000. But the one nice thing is what we recently created is found on page 36. Instead of talking about generalities, you as fiduciaries can really see what the excess revenue budget looks like. So in the second quarter, we started at $79,000. There were some contributions, some growth, no distributions, but ended at $130,000. And then in the third quarter, starting at $130,654, about $52,000 in contributions, a little bit of growth, no distributions, and so the ending balance is just under $185,000. So nice accounting of that. So you can either lower the cost, give it back to participants, or spend more money. It's really up to you because there are different levers. Most of the time, the fee remains the same, and you can give back to participants any excess beyond what you normally would need. But really, this can give you a better picture of what to do when that time comes.
So it's not the two numbers combined, it's just the one number.
It's like an old school, yep, it's like an old school checking account. Yeah, just carrying it down. So it's, the latest number is 184,945. Yeah.
And we will have some money going out for the NAGDA conference, is that right? So that would show up in, the next report or something as far as distributions?
Correct. If it's accounting for in that, and sometimes there's a lag, so, but yes, generally speaking, it would account for that in that quarter. So I think the only side discussion is the MFS growth on watch, if we could have that discussion or vote. Again, our recommendation is to place MFS, mid-cap growth, on watch status, given the allocation to high-quality companies and international stocks.
I'll move that we put them on watch.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And the removal, right?
I'm sorry?
Are we removing the one?
Not yet. That's the next item, I think.
If you want to go ahead.
Okay. So in your smaller report in front of you, this is the real estate manager search report. Again, we're not investing in direct real estate. In other words, we're investing in companies that either own, operate, develop, or manage properties. So think housing, home builders, apartments, malls, hospitals sometimes. And so essentially Invesco Real Estate invests in companies that have ties to the real estate market. So if you have the smaller report in front of you, we do have the incumbent Invesco, but we also have 3 possible replacement candidates that invest in those real estate investment trusts, or REITs, or REITs as we call it. But we also have somewhat of a simplified version, and there is a fund currently on the menu called the Vanguard Midcap Index Fund that you could conceivably roll the real estate funds into that particular product. It's not a like for like, but as I said, sometimes some committees see the allocation under 1% and say, back to my point, some of these participants really, really like real estate funds, or you could say, what are we doing with the fund that has 1/3% of assets? Let's just roll it up into a similar fund on the menu. And just for the sake of discussion, we've included that possible replacement as the Vanguard Midcap Index Fund. So going into your search document, taking a look at page 1, this is the rationale for why we're replacing. Again, performance has suffered, the sector allocation has been off, but more importantly, with the retirement of the chief investment officer here at the end of the summer, all of those reasons are pointing us to replacement. On page 2 is the incumbent Invesco Real Estate. And then on page 3 are 2 of a similar strategy, real estate investment trust fund, one managed by DFA, or Dimensional Fund Advisors, out of Chicago, and then Principal Real Estate. These 2 are actively managed real estate funds. And then if you flip ahead to page 4, you have a real estate fund managed by Vanguard. This is passively managed. It's going to it's designed to track the performance of that underlying benchmark. And then finally, you have this apples and oranges with Vanguard Midcap Index. There's about 8% of that portfolio in real estate investment trusts. So it's apples and oranges. I'm not going to say the Vanguard Midcap Index is like for like. In fact, it's the opposite, but it's already on the menu, and it's the closest thing. If you wanted to shorten your menu and move away from the real estate fund, this would be the fund we'd recommend. Does that make sense? No?
On page,
No, but I mean, these are all risky regardless, right? Because if you're talking the management of malls, I mean, what of a dying breed are all of these? I mean, they're having to all reinvent. I mean, obviously there's gonna be people who don't manage them all the time, but I mean, if you don't have renters, then they're not collecting the rents and they're not sustainable.
Correct. Or you get mall operators that see that as you know, these are basically coffins, let's reinvent them as pickleball courts or whatever.
Right.
And so, yes, you're trying to find managers who are being opportunistic about apartments or malls or prisons or hospitals or whatever it is for property. Where are the good investment themes? So you're absolutely right. Not focusing on malls. Yeah, no one goes there anymore. So, it's a basket of real estate products where you have owner operators, developers, you know, home builders, as I said, so.
So it, like in our area, the logistics, right, like Prologis, things like that, you have those companies, that would also be part of a real estate.
Exactly, yeah.
when these returns were emailed to us on page 5, the Invesco, I know you said it's not the same, I'm sorry, the Vanguard, but the Vanguard's beating everything else here in the 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year anyway, sometimes significantly. So if the S&P 500 is ballpark 8% a year, and this is getting 10% over 10 years, that's looking a lot better.
And sorry, what page?
On page 5 of your
Yep.
report,
Yep.
So if you're looking at a return, so middle of the page, the Vanguard Midcap Fund beats everything on the 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year timeframes.
Fair, and keep in mind, that has 8% of real estate, but it has a lot more allocated to technology, consumer cyclical, defensive, yeah. But you're right, from a performance standpoint, the diversity helps the risk and the return potential.
To me, just looking at the returns on the 3, 5, and 10-year, all the real estate proposals don't really match up. So I could see divesting from real estate in the fund and just leaving it auto rolling into the mid cap if you're already there.
So if we had a participant who was interested in real estate, and we remove this and we go with the more general that performs better, their option then would be self-directed, I guess?
Correct, either take it and accept it, or open up a self-directed brokerage account and get a portion of their real estate through the Schwab option.
And then those fees are gonna be higher likely than if we have it.
Well, so Schwab is $50 annually to have an account, and then Schwab would have, I'm not sure how many REIT funds are out there in the marketplace, dozens, maybe hundreds.
Yeah.
They would have the entire suite of all of those investment vehicles to select from.
Okay.
And they can pick and choose whichever one that they like.
So real quick, speaking of fees, take a look at page 8. So a lot of inputs into our analysis are a lot of variables in our calculation. But if you take a look at the top third of page 8, almost in the middle column, you'll see that percent sign EXP. This is the expense ratio. You'll see Invesco Real Estate at 80 basis points or 0.8%. Principal is at 86. Then you go DFA is at 18. The Vanguard Real Estate is 13. And so this is where long-windedly I wanted to answer your question is conceivably the maintenance fee could be higher, but the fee cost of moving from Invesco to Vanguard Real Estate could be significantly less, depending on the solution or the product that they choose.
Okay.
And even if our members are really into real estate, they're not buying and selling houses here with the extra money they have because we don't have that much invested in the whole plan.
Correct.
Real estate wise,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 600 participants in that fund and 1.9 million total assets. So if there was a change, we would then send out a notice to just those 600 that have that fund.
I guess from my time on the retirement board, we do invest a lot in real estate, so it's of interest, but I think the Invesco product obviously has not been performing and it has a high fee, so it may not have been that there were many people moving to that because it didn't look like a good option, so.
Yeah, good point. Shall we continue? Okay, flip ahead to page 6 or back to page 6. Highlighting the upper half of this page is we do take that full market cycle over 5 years and we look at standard deviation, which is variability or volatility of the performance over 5 years. And we also take a look at the return. The return is on the vertical axis, the wiggle or volatility is on the horizontal axis. And our ideal is to get in the upper left as much as possible, essentially maximizing return without taking on any risk. Since that's impossible, what we call is we get closest to that, the efficient frontier. And so you'll see the index, which is that navy blue box out by itself, if you will, essentially taking on the same amount of risk, but the return potential over 5 years, as you mentioned, is much greater. But again, it's a different product. It is a diversified mid-cap index fund. So moving down, you'll see of the grouping or the real estate investment trust funds, that green box, which is managed by Principal, shows the best. Meaning it's taking on very little risk compared to the others, but the return potential is higher. Followed by that blue, not the navy blue, but the blue box, which is DFA. Again, that's the other actively managed fund that's a candidate. The orange box, which is the index fund, but it still invests wholly in real estate investment trusts, is a close third. But take a look at the triangle, essentially not capturing much return while taking incrementally the same amount of risk. That's that triangle, which is the Invesco Real Estate or the fund that's currently on the menu. Moving down into the bottom left, a similar chart, but what we call the Sharpe ratio. The Sharpe ratio is essentially the risk-free return or premium divided by the standard deviation. So we want a relatively high standard deviation because we want a low denominator. you'll see the one outlier is that index product managed by Vanguard, but it's not apples to apples. Moving to the green column, this is the principal at 25 basis points, DFA at 23, Vanguard at 21, and then way on the far left, 13. And I use that term literally very, very low on the bottom left is the incumbent. And then we take a look at upside, downside capture. So when the real estate market is booming, how do these funds participate, or how much do they participate? And when there's a sell-off, how much these funds participate on the downside. You can see the Vanguard is pretty nice because it's the index. It captures 97, which we would expect, of the upside, but it captures 96% of the downside. It's nice to see the blue portion of 96 on the upside and only 93 on the downside. And almost identical, just one down a notch, is the principal or green. Only 95% of the upside, but also only 92% of the downside. And then you'll notice Invesco captures only 89% of the upside, but almost a full 93% of the downside. And then nothing really worthy of note on page 7, the investment style. You can see very, very similar strategies of all these funds. In fact, it's very hard to pick out the distinct shapes because of the grouping is so tight. Then I already mentioned the fees on page 8. Before we get into the rest of the document, I at least want to pause to see if there's a leaning towards terminating Invesco real estate. If you do you map it to another real estate fund? If you do, is it active or passive? Or do you just map it to the index that's already on the menu?
I've been looking at getting rid of Invesco for a while, so it has low returns overall. It's the highest fee in the fund and obviously about the lowest returns, so I don't see a point in keeping it. So I would like to get rid of it and then move into, I just roll everybody into the mid cap and give them, do they have notice in case they didn't want to do that? So, okay. That takes care of my major concerns.
I'm all for moving out of Invesco, but of those 600 people who are in real estate are there for a reason. And so I would be more inclined to roll it into the Vanguard Real Estate Index. At least it has the word, as simple as it sounds, the word real estate is there. And I think it would make people more comfortable.
Either way. It's like roll the dice, right? I mean,
But I do think we need to go out of it.
they're really close. So I don't.
All right, so I agree about moving away from Invesco. I do like the idea of having a real estate option for people. So,
Do we want to do this in 2 separate parts then? So one for Invesco and then we can vote separately on the other?
sure.
All right, wide motion to get rid of Invesco from the plan menu, please.
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
And then I just have one question. So on either one of the yields, so I mean, if you do the real estate, which one's performing better? I mean, obviously that's what our goal is, right? I mean,
Sure. So if you go back of the smaller report, on page 5,
right?
in terms of the 5-year, so middle portion of page 5, go almost in the middle column, the 5-year, you can see principal average 5.5% a year, followed by 5.18 DFA, followed by 4.77 of the Vanguard Real Estate, and then 3.1 of the Invesco. So of the real estate funds, it goes principal, then DFA, Vanguard Real Estate, and Invesco. But back to your point, then you have the
It's like 3/4 of a
broad
point.
mid-cap of 11.23.
Brenda, did you have something you want to share?
Yeah, just to add a little bit of color to this, the investment planning tool that we have in place, where they get the guidance from Wilshire, usually has like a teeny tiny amount, like maybe 3% that goes into that type of an investment. So we may have seen an uptick in money there because it's part of the guidance that we're getting from the Wilshire piece. So if people are using that guidance, it might be easier for them to just see what they already have moved to something else. Obviously, if it was gone, then moving forward, it couldn't be part of the guidance that Wilshire was offering in the tool, but I think that could be why we're seeing what we're seeing in it right now.
What do we do if there's a tie? It looks like there's a tie.
Oh.
So, because I mean, it does look like, Vanguard has been, I mean, even in losses, does better, the mid cap. So I mean, seems like there's 2-2 here.
Yeah.
Not
But
being a-
that's
not
already
being a
part of
rocket
our
scientist
lineup,
or
right?
anything.
Is the Vanguard already part of our lineup?
It's already part of the lineup. But I also think how the committee is structured, I think the chair is the tiebreaker,
Okay.
right? I is how I,
Yeah, so
How does she
technically,
vote and the tiebreaker? You can't do both. I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but.
so technically, I can make all of these decisions
Right.
alone, but
I
I
can
choose to utilize the advice of the committee.
And I think this
That's a
gets
tough one.
into really what a fiduciary is. So do we, and I can see totally both sides of the argument. Do we go based on returns only and we say, we're gonna do what's, what we see financially best for our folks? Or do we, say that they picked real estate, by golly, they put, certain allocation in that, and these 600 people, it may be really important to them for whatever reason, and that, their background, or I know retirement does have a large portion in real estate. A lot of our, a lot of people made money on buying, selling houses, fixing them in this county specifically. So I think that's what makes these difficult decisions, because I don't think there's a right, I think you could see both sides, and I'd be happy if it's, voted in on the real estate aspect of, we're gonna keep a REIT. I totally get that, because I think you can make the argument that you're doing your best for those members as well, on both sides.
Yeah, and I think it's more, in the real estate piece, I think of it less of buying and selling houses, although that is a new trend, right? Corporations actually buying single-family homes. But when you think about like the apartments, the complexes that are going up all over the Bay Area and the Valley, I mean, it's more than just, somebody purchasing a home, and probably less malls. But to me, I just think it's a component that some people are interested in. And so if that other option is there and they say, I don't like what this real estate option you picked, they have the ability to move it to anywhere else if they really wanted to move away from real estate. So I just think of it as a basic part of a diverse portfolio. So,
Okay, you win.
okay.
So when I look at the expenses,
What page?
so I'm looking at page 5, then I'm looking at page 8.
Page 5
So
and
I'm
8.
looking at the returns
Sure.
for DFA. The expense for DFA is 0.18. Principal, the return is 5.5, but the expense is 0.86. And then with the Vanguard, the return is 4.77, but the expense is 0.13. So I'm kind of leaning towards, yes, principal has a better return, but it also has very high fees, just like Invesco did. So I would lean towards DFA or the Vanguard Real Estate Index, just my opinion. And I'm okay with whatever we go with. But I think that matters, the fees compared to the returns.
Somebody motion.
Okay, I'll move that we move to DFA Real Estate Securities.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye. That's okay.
Okay. Motion carries.
we'll work with nationwide on an effective date and review the communication.
We are going a lot longer than we typically do, so I just want to check into the committee to see if everybody's still okay timing-wise. Okay. So some of this may be the debrief from NAGDA we can move to the next meeting, and it's a little bit more long-term view of some things we may want to consider, since we're short on time. So I'll go ahead. I think the next action, the mutual fund.
Is it okay if, I prepared just something for the members to follow. Can I pass that out?
Absolutely.
Can you grab one and pass it, please? Thank you. So before I start, John and I used a term called CIT. It stands for Collective Investment Trust. Do you all understand the concept of a mutual fund, or should I just briefly explain what that is as a springboard into this discussion?
Mutual funds, a collection of stocks, right?
Collection of securities, a portfolio manager buys and sells, and at the end of the day, they price their mutual fund. A mutual fund is registered with the SEC. A collective investment trust is different. So in the early days of a retirement plan, whether it be 401k or 457, these mutual fund companies would come to plan sponsors like Fidelity or T. Rowe Price and say, we can manage your fund or plan for free, but a lot of the funds would be T. Rowe Price or Fidelity. Those are the mutual fund products at the retail level. At the pension side, at the trustee, foundation, endowment, they didn't use mutual funds because the assets were so big. They used collective investment trusts. Very similar to a mutual fund, but also very different. The main difference is the cost. And so one of the things that we have been talking about with the San Joaquin County staff over the years is that the amount of assets in the target date funds have grown so quickly that they are able to move from the mutual fund version to the collective investment trust version, or CIT. The savings over the years hasn't been that great, and so as much as we've talked about it, it really wasn't worth the squeeze, if you will, or worth the effort. But we keep tracking at it, and since the market and the adoption of the target date has been like this, we wanted to at least agendize it to see if there was an opportunity to save participants money. So there's a benefit, but there's also some complications or some drawbacks. The main benefit is at the top of the second page, and in the bottom right of that chart is that $64,327. Collectively, participants would save about $65,000 a year. And if you were to adopt them, that fee chart on the section that we talked about would continue to drop because we're constantly looking at ways to lower costs. But also, if you go back to the upper right of that page, there are two funds that if you were to go to the CIT are actually a little bit more. So the participants in the balanced in the 2015, not by much, but they would be paying more. So it's not going to be a win-win for every fund or every participant. Now, granted, it's about $1,000 over $138 million, but I at least wanted to share that the straight pricing with the CIT is 37 basis points regardless of the vintage, where you can see the mutual fund expense goes from 34 to 46. The other impact is there's going to be a change if you adopt the CIT version. Participants would no longer have a ticker symbol or that 5-letter that they could look up on Yahoo Finance or Barron's or whatever search engine they use. But nonetheless, we can solve for that, but they can no longer have that tickered product that a lot of participants like. And then there's the paperwork. There is a little bit more paperwork that certainly as your consultant would pre-populate. And I wish Aaron was here, but there's probably 3 to 4 hours of work in reviewing the CIT paperwork and approving that or making changes. And so again, there is a somewhat of a cost to this $65,000 annual savings. But as your job as a consultant, my job as your consultant, is to present these and have a discussion.
What's the savings based on? Pat?
The savings are based on every vintage or sleeve or investment option within the target date with the year. the total assets in each of the vintages, the difference between the expense of the mutual fund and the collective investment trust, and just multiplying the difference by the assets and then summing them up at the bottom.
That's on an annual basis?
Correct.
So I have a question for Brenda and John. Nationwide has been here, what, 3 years now? Okay. And I know it's been a lot of work to get the employees involved in it. I know you've done a lot of outreach, because there was 2 or 3 changes prior to that. So it was like, okay, are we settled down now? And I think part of the money going out of the fund and part of the money now staying in the fund is stability. Even if it's just a look, you know, it hasn't, because it changed. There was like a couple different years we had different, or it seemed like it was bouncing around a little bit till it landed in Nationwide. Would this, I mean, I almost all for saving some money for people, but would this change at this time be transparent? Or is it just another change? Are we throwing another thing at about the time everybody's kind of going, oh, well, they're a little more stable than they used to be. Maybe I'll leave my money and see what they're going to do. I would be concerned about that because that lack of stability was a problem for me when I was here.
So like Vincent shared, there's pros and cons to it. The pro is there would be savings. I mean, part of the thing to keep in mind too is this investment lineup is here simply because it came from the other provider, right? So that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind. The second thing is the reduction in savings. I'm all for. It's not like the name won't say T. Rowe Price. But you're right, there won't be, the downside, like Vincent mentioned, is there won't be the ticker symbols. It won't be as easy for people to kind of go and search for it. So while the core of the name won't change, there could be other concerns. So it just kind of depends, you know, I appreciate that you're kind of bringing in, you know, that viewpoint.
So I think this is a really cool idea. My concern is we're just getting used to you guys being stable and maybe bring it back next year. You know, let things settle down. You're making the change for the age 50 for safety. So possibly, you know, there's other things that we're doing right now,
We've
which
done
only
this.
matter to the people who it matters to at that time. But my
Yeah.
concern, like I said, it mattered to me because I came from a county that had the Nationwide for many, many, many years. And I'm going, why are these guys bouncing around? What's going on here?
Yeah.
So,
We've done this with another one of our agencies that we work together on, and I got almost nothing, and definitely not anything negative back from our membership because the name isn't really changing that much. It'll still say T. Rowe Price, so it's not like they're gonna see it move to Vanguard or Fidelity or something like that. It'll have the same name, but that ticker symbol just won't be available, and the price will go down. So it's really easy for me to say it's the same type of investment, but it's similar to the pooling investment that your county pension can do, and the price has dropped. So benefit, benefit, benefit.
just
So
thought I'd
it-
ask the question.
I hope that helps.
And one of the reasons that I think it's something that would be beneficial moving forward. Right now, we're gonna save, you know, the $65,000 annually, but I think as time goes on, and we really try to drive more participation in the plan, and we look at things like, you know, as we consider some of the things that were discussed at NAGDA, like auto enrollment or county matching, I think we might end up seeing more people in these, which means that the expenses, you know, the fees could go down even more. So I think as we try to grow participation in the plan, the reason that we do see a large amount of participation in these funds is because they're diversified and they're not complicated for people who would like to find, you know, set it and forget it type of option. And so if we're gonna continue to have a large participation in those funds and the fees continue to go down, I think it's always a good thing for our employees and retirees.
No, not opposed to it, just.
Action item or?
Yes,
Yeah.
this would be an action item if.
Yeah, this is a baby step, right? It won't be It won't be a big look, but if, you know, like I said, if you're going with it because this is what you had before and it's not like you're looking at other options, at least the name will be the same.
And if people are looking for performance, they can go to the Nationwide portal, right, and see what the performance looks like, so we can drive people that way as well.
So that will disappear. So it's good that you mentioned that. So what happens is when we move over to the CIT, because it hasn't been in this plan, I don't believe it'll reflect history for the CIT. Trying to remember if it did for the other agency. But
It'll
sometimes.
show current performance, but it's not gonna show the history.
Right.
Okay.
So-
But there will be fun data sheets that could very well get stale, but there will be information available, and
Yes.
performance, I think, is on there.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But because it's like the same type of investment, the history wouldn't be very different.
All right.
I motion to approve the recommendation.
Do we have a second?
I can second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
I abstain.
Certainly.
I'd like to abstain, please.
All right. Motion carries. How do we say that, Kimberly? 3-0 with 1 abstention? Okay.
3-0-0. 3-0-1.
3-0-1, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
3-0-1, yeah.
So then I'll work with T. Rowe Price on, like I said, getting that paperwork ready for you to review and approve if no changes, but that'll be your prerogative.
Thank you.
Great, and then we'll just need a simple email, just letting us know the changes, so, all the changes discussed today can be in just a one simple email, and then we can get started. I don't have timing on CITs, there's a lot of back and forth with paperwork. It's not as simple as just the regular fund change process. Typically 60 days, so mid-January would be our next available opening. With a CIT, it could be a little longer based on getting that fund set up and so forth, so there could be a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
So we don't know exactly when that specific day will occur yet.
Okay.
But if I can just get email summarizing all that, we can put that in place as soon as possible. Thank you.
Certainly. All right, so on the agenda, I added an item for consideration by the committee, looking at our schedule for our meetings for next year. And this really kind of came out of, a couple times, and I know this time we had one report that's not available. It's like our meetings are scheduled relatively close to the end of the quarter. And so would there be a benefit to shift the meetings so that there's a little bit more time to make sure we have the reports and time for the committee to review in advance of the meetings? So in your packet, there is the 2025 current meeting schedule and what it would be if we looked at different options, either shifting it to February being our first quarterly meeting or March. So I don't know if the committee has any interest in making the change, and if they do, if they have a preference for where we shifted the meetings.
Just option 1 and option 2, you both have problems with holidays, so either one is, what are you swaying to? Option 1?
I'm swaying to option 1.
I prefer either current schedule or option 1. I think just with the December 18th being so close to holidays, I think we're gonna have low participation and attendance. So current or option 1 is,
I think option 1 would be best for me.
When's Thanksgiving next year?
It is the 27th of November.
Okay, that's far enough away then, okay. Yeah, I'm okay with option 1. As long as you send invites.
you requested the option because of scheduling issues? I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, so because the end of the quarter, like the reports we're reviewing are for information through the end of September. And so the time that it takes for our vendors to prepare all the reports, sometimes it's a little bit tight. And there was one report that wasn't available on the Schwab. So just to give us a little bit more space to ensure that we have the data and it's not a crunch, that was my suggestion. Because I think as long as we're meeting quarterly and regularly is the most important piece, not so much which month of the year that we're meeting. So,
Is that something that needs to be voted on though? This is.
yes, yes, please. So there is a
Oh,
motion.
possible, okay. Motion to approve option one.
Second?
Okay. All right, so I've got a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
I'm going to come in here and say you've all just received your calendar invites for next year. So those, I will send you a reminder to remove those and to accept the new ones that I'll send out this week. Okay?
All right. Then in interest of time, we will do the NAGBA brief next time. There's some exciting things I think that would be good for the rest of the committee to hear, and hopefully we'll have closer to full attendance and can review some of those options to talk about. So, any other comments from committee members before we close?
Thanks to Nationwide, I presented a briefing on deferred comp, and a different week we did dividend returns, and we had 6 people show up in my office right after, and we called Brenda, and she picked up, and she's gotten people through, so that was really cool progress. So it feels great to have that partnership with Nationwide where, here's the information, and then they asked a question, I said, I don't know, but I know a lady that knows the answer. And we called, so thank you.
Right.
Well, Sergeant, maybe in your retirement, instead of working at the courthouse, you can go get a job with Nationwide. All right.
That's why the quirky little thing Nationwide is on your side, or what?
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, so I would, on the agenda, it shows our next meeting is January 30th, but we've just taken action to change that, so our next meeting will be February 27th. Call the meeting to close. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you guys later.
Have a great day, sir. What's your background? What brought you here?